Welcome everyone. I think people are coming in and we can start. Welcome to this online panel discussion, Contemporary Take Beyond Cultural Heritage, organized by the British Council and the Prince Claus Fund. My name is Sanne Letschert. I'm currently coordinating the Cultural Emergency Response Program of the Prince Claus Fund, and I will be your host for this event. The two organizations that brought us together today are natural allies when it comes to the promotion and preservation of arts, culture, and heritage. The British Council is UK's foremost cultural relations organization working in the fields of arts, education, and English language in 100 countries worldwide. In South Asia, the British Council supports the preservation of heritage and cultural traditions and runs a flagship program called Our Shared Cultural Heritage, through which it supports young people to engage with heritage more. The Prince Claus Fund for Culture and Development, based in the Netherlands, supports, connects, and celebrates artists and cultural practitioners where cultural expression is under pressure. This is specifically in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Through its Cultural Emergency Response Program, the fund provides first aid to cultural heritage affected by conflict or disaster. And we work directly with local partners and to do so. The two organizations joined forces and issued a joint call for proposals, Contemporary Take Beyond Cultural Heritage, aimed to enable young people to engage with diverse cultural heritage within their own context or across borders. It focused on countries in South Asia, all with rich, multiple, overlapping cultural histories, and was set up in close collaborations with cultural practitioners from the region. The projects could find expression in contemporary art forms and new media intervention, and also invited to approach and challenge the concept of cultural heritage in different ways. In total, we received 151 applications, of which 13 projects were supported. During this 75-minute conversation, we will be discussing issues related to new takes on cultural heritage addressed through two of them. One of them is Sniffing Out the Differences, presented by Kadambari Sahu, and Fuzzscape, presented by Prasiit Sthapit. Joining for discussion are Yasmeen Lari, as well, Director of the Heritage Foundation Pakistan, and Junhi Han, Chief of the Cultural Sector of UNESCO Delhi. But before I introduce them further to you, I have some things that I have to tell you to make sure this runs smoothly. So you can ask your questions through the chat function of the webinar. The Q&A function is disabled, but we have someone keeping track of the chat and forwarding all your questions. Also, this session will be recorded, but all participants will not be visible on screen. Furthermore, closed captioning is available. If you would like to use it, please click on the closed caption icon at the bottom of the screen, which will bring up subtitles. There's also a link available in the chat. We have some tech people helping us out today. They might pop up on the screen, just so you know. I think this is all the housekeeping issues. So without further ado, can I ask all panelists to enable video and sound, please? Hello, welcome everyone. Much better. I would actually like to ask you to introduce yourself briefly to everyone listening in. Kadambari, you want to go first?
Sure. So hi, I'm Kadambari Sahu. I'm a new media designer and a design leader, and I'm currently working as Senior Vice President of Design at Value Labs. My practice is actually in the intersection of art, technology, and culture, and I'd like to study behaviors and patterns and the cultures which can augment or enhance our experiences and how we interact with them. So I work on intangible and tangible aspects of the experiences. Thank you.
Thanks. Junhi, could you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Junhi Han. I'm the Chief of the Culture Sector at the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office. Prior to this assignment, I was in Paris UNESCO headquarters in the World Heritage Center. Thank you.
Prasiit, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Prasiit Sthapit. I'm a photographer and a filmmaker based in Kathmandu. My photography practice is has mostly to do with long-term social documentary projects, but my filmmaking is more commercial, which is also why and how Fuzzscape came about, which is completely not our non-commercial venture. But yeah, I'll talk more about that later. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Last but not least, Yasmeen.
Hello there. Well, this is architect Yasmeen Lari from Pakistan. I'm a humanitarian architect as well as a heritage and environmental conservationist. I'm co-founder, of course, of Heritage Foundation, but also of something called Barefoot Social Architecture, because I work with marginalized communities and especially with beggar communities that are living around World Heritage sites such as Makli. So it's a very interesting combination where we are able to work around heritage themes and see how we can involve the communities around them. So it's wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing the two presentations from these young people, and I think it'll be very exciting. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all for introducing yourself and for joining us. We're very happy to have you here and joining us for the conversation. I would now like to give the word to Kadambari, designer and project coordinator of the very innovative project, Sniffing Out the Differences. You told me yesterday it's raining prizes for the project you have done through this open call. So please, could you tell us more?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the video first. Let's go ahead with that. Can we play the video, please?
Sure.
I hope my screen is visible. Sniffing Out the Differences is a multisensory exhibition. It is composed of a lot of installation 5 right now, and it uses the medium of smell to talk about socially relevant stories of today. It deals with the modern conception of identity and xenophobia that often gets created in the path of trying to understand ourselves at times and identifying people. So the starting point of this particular project was smells. We started with looking at what smells are. So for us, smells were not just physiological triggers, but it was also about the cultural descriptors. And we thought that there are also psychological, they trigger certain psychological memories. So we found that smells are actually encoding a lot of everyday rituals, festivities, and a lot of part of cultural aspects of many communities and people. So by that extension, smell is not just cultural artifact, but also can be taken as something which is cultural heritage. Smells also reside in certain spaces, and that's why they have distinct smells. So, for example, spaces of worship or water bodies had their distinct smell, so we can relate with them with their smells as well. There are very different properties of smells, like they attract and repel, but apart from that, they trigger memories, and that's why they're such an evocative medium. They're also very well coded in language. So, for example, the phrase like "mitti ki khushboo," which means smell of the earth, actually, uh, direct translation. But what it actually expresses is nostalgia and the feeling of calling back to your homeland. So so that's a very sort of evocative medium that we wanted to use to talk about certain social issues that we're facing today in the globalized world in a way. So we started first with looking inwards and towards ourselves, and in my case, towards what is my cultural identity. When people ask me question, where are you from? It's difficult. Sometimes it's easy to say India, and then after that, when they probe me with a question, but where in India? And that's where I get baffled, because I believe that my own cultural identity is composed of all these places that I've lived in. And also, all these places are composed of different communities and people that have called these places home, which also included a lot of people who are migrants. And it was also a sort of social commentary on, how people migrants are also part of our cities, and sometimes there are violence which are committed on that. So it was sort of social commentary on that, when we ourselves are composed of so many cultural identity, why are we trying to discriminate on people who are coming to our cities, and sometimes when they make their home in those cities. This is how the installation looked like, and in the video you've seen that also clicking on some of the cities, it brings about some of the festivities which I relate with those cities and smell of those. The second was looking at our identity in a broader terms, and it was towards national identity and how do we called or became Indians as such. We looked into history and wanted to understand that what was it that actually gave the whole freedom struggle the fuel, and the quest to find our identity. And one such event was Jallianwala Bagh. So just a brief about Jallianwala Bagh. Jallianwala Bagh was a place where a massacre was committed. So it was Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and it is above 100 years now, just above 100 years. On April 13, 1919, General Dyer opened a fire on innocent people who was peacefully demonstrating, sealing the exits. And due to this indiscriminate firing, there were more than 1,500 people killed and injured. And many of the people, to flee from this firing, they actually jumped into the well and tried to save themselves, but they were also, they could also not be alive. So it was a tragedy of a national proportion, and this injustice that the people saw that time, people under the Raj or the colonial rule, then fought and forged their identity. So for us, this was an event that we were looking at, where we were digging our past and getting to know about our identity. This event has been made in very different cultural artifacts like film, animation, graphic novels, and a lot of other stories. But the different take that we had on this was that we were using the medium of smell, and also the narrative was that we are going into the past. It's almost like an archaeological site where people are excavating and looking at these bottles, and the story is driven through the perfume. The first three ones actually establish the festivity, and the later ones are actually about the aftermath after the firing was done. The smell in each of them is based on the festivities and things that are there, but the last one is actually about the emotional response that you would get after looking at such a massacre. The second one installation that we had was identity stories. And in identity stories, we were looking at contemporary Indians, how they live in different cities, and how a certain smell associate with a certain event or place or things that they call their own. And this was a retake on the first installation that I expressed diversity in us. So that was more towards data visualization that we have tried to sort of use, and it was on the migrants. Here we try to use the episodes from their life and try to narrate them in form of stories and smell. Next was our installation Mir Abdul Attarwala, and this was about the life of people in the war-torn region of Kashmir. The whole installation contradicts in a way that there's video which is extremely tranquil, serene, and when you see the poetry, is there actually expression of the person, a fictional character, Mir Abdul, who's trying to sort of express his feelings through poetry and smell. The whole point of creating this installation was to create empathy towards the people who live there. Also for our users, we used a certain fact so they get understanding of what those poetry meant. And the last one in the series was Xeno 500, which was a modern take on xenophobia. And it was all about looking speculatively at the current and the future to come. We were using modern technology, basically surveillance technologies to curb xenophobia. And it actually is not prescriptive. It is more of a critical examination of surveillance and identity and xenophobia and all of these things combined. And it raises a lot of questions than it answers any. So in all of these installations that we had, the one point that was common was, of course, smell and then identities. But really, Sniffing Out the Differences was a social message to fight biases and to fight xenophobia. And we thought that for culture, it's just opposite of xenophobia. Culture is all about something which is formed together. It is never formed in isolation. It is ever evolving, and it is always accommodating. So this aspect of culture, we wanted to sort of reflect in the best medium possible, which we thought was perfumes or smell, because they transgress boundaries and they cannot be contained and they mix very well. So perfume, in a way, is inspiration for us for creating this social message, and the message of also sniffing out the differences is to fight our biases and to fight xenophobia. Also, we are very thankful to Prince Claus Fund, British Council, and Value Labs for supporting and encouraging us. And as Sanne was talking about, this installations have sparked a lot of imagination in terms in very different sectors, because how interaction design, perfume making, social art, all of these things came together, and these exhibition was made. So yeah, I'm very thankful for Prince Claus Fund and British Council to give us this opportunity to create such installation.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Kadambari. It was beautiful, and it's such a really nice way how you've used smell to approach something like cultural heritage. You really emphasize the role historic narratives and heritage can play in forging a cultural identity. Could you tell us a little more about that, why you think that is so important and why that link is so strong, and yeah, how you use, why smell is so important for that?
I think what happens is smell, as I said, is a very evocative medium. It is actually directly connected to our emotional centers of the brain. So that way it gives a very visceral response to most of the things. Also, I believe that it is a intangible cultural heritage. And you could experience that when you are actually not in your city. Sometimes the kind of food when you experience in a foreign land, it just takes you back to your memories. And that's why I think, going back to those memories and evoking a certain memory are best done with smell. And that's why these two things, being intangible cultural heritage, and also this whole medium of taking you back to the certain places or discerning those kind of things are best done by smell. So that's why smell we chose as a medium. Also, because it is so evocative, and we were looking at, talking about culture, we thought the best way to go forward would be, so we could have done it in a manner where you could have like a perfume, you could sniff it, and then you could read a factual data about it. But what we thought would be great would be to actually talk about stories that we feel, or we, as Indians or as people who are living today. And also that way, talking about our identity. And taking that approach to even cultural heritage, talking about past, present, and even going towards the future, that what we want to leave behind in a way. So that way is we covered a lot of area in that regards.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can ask the other panelists if they have a first response, because I can imagine, Junhi, this is a very different take on heritage and cultural identity than UNESCO usually has.
Oh yes. No, actually, I think it's not very different because I mean, as the project shows, I think the cultural identity is being built on a daily basis. Actually, our daily life builds our cultural identity. And then, of course, everything we inherit in our environment, where we live, and what we see is also all part of our heritage. And for UNESCO, actually heritage along with the creativity have always been two major pillars in the culture sector's program of UNESCO since very beginning, since its establishment. Because as the project shows, and as you rightly said, heritage constitutes a source of identity, but also at the same time, it brings cohesion for society. Heritage can bring together those people who are divided and who have different cultural identity. Over the last several decades, the international community has seen, unfortunately, I mean, many different cultures clash, but at the same time, we have several examples which showcase the power of cultural heritage that can bring together different people who were once in conflictual situation. Maybe if you may allow me, I can bring some the cases of the reconstruction of Mostar town and bridge in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which to my opinion should be most representative of this case. The historic town of Mostar was developed in the 15th and 16th century as an Ottoman frontier town in the area where there were Roman Catholic Croats and the Eastern Orthodox Serb, along with the Sephardic Jews. They used to live together, and all these people until, along with the Bosniak Muslims, for more than 4 centuries, when the conflict broke out in the 1990s, which actually destroyed most of the historic town and old bridge. After almost a decade, in 2004, the old Mostar bridge was rebuilt by all these different groups, such as Roman Catholic Croats and then Serbs and Bosnian Muslims, along with Jews, who were united again together to rebuild the Mostar bridge as well as the old town, which embedded all their culture. So hence, these Mostar bridge and old town actually belonged to all of them. And at the end, this Mostar bridge and old town has become a symbol of this of shared heritage. So this reconstructed Mostar bridge has become a symbol of tolerance, a shared life of Muslims, Christian, and Jews. Mosques and churches and synagogues existed still today side by side in the old town of Mostar. In addition, this bridge and all the surrounding of old part of the town were inscribed in the list of World Heritage Sites in 2005, following the finalization of the reconstruction project. In principle, the World Heritage Committee considers reconstructed heritage sites for World Heritage only in exceptional cases, and this was one of the exceptional cases. Because although the bridge and the various monuments in the old area were reconstructed, the World Heritage Committee recognized the value that those reconstructed bridge and old city embed, which is the united effort brought by all these different communities after such a tragic conflict between them. So therefore, actually the value World Heritage Committee inscribed in the World Heritage list was not the masterpieces of architecture or this church or whatsoever, but the symbolic value made by the power of cultural heritage that brought together communities, experienced the terrible conflict between them, but united once again through their common heritage. So I have taken some text from World Heritage Committee, why they inscribed this old town and Mostar bridge. I quote, "With the renaissance of the old bridge and its surroundings, the symbolic power and meaning of the city of Mostar has been reinforced and strengthened, underlining the unlimited efforts of human solidarity for peace and powerful cooperation in the face of overwhelming catastrophe. So, of course, cultural identity can divide people, but we believe that power of cultural heritage can bring them together. So this is the view that we very much would like to encourage, take as a subject of cultural identity.
Thank you for sharing that, Junhi. That's very beautiful how you underline how it can actually emphasize the commonalities instead of the differences between groups who share cultural heritage. And that, I think, Kadambari, that's exactly what you are trying to tie into with your project. It's overarching, it's using something everyone knows, smell. Everyone knows smelling the coffee somewhere and thinking of a memory of, I don't know, at your grandfather's place in the morning. So that actually finding the common ground is something that's very important to you as well, I can imagine.
Yeah, that's true. That's totally true. Yeah.
Yasmeen, is this something that you've been experiencing as important as well at the Makli Work Heritage site, where you work with the communities there?
Yes, thank you, Sanne. I think we all agree that cultural heritage is a unifying force, and it's very important for all of us to try to work towards it. But I would like to really comment on Kadambari's presentation. I thought it was very innovative. I think, I think the best one I liked was the Jallianwala Bagh, because it evoked so many memories for me as well, coming from the subcontinent and knowing the history and as to what happened. But to experience it through the sense of smell is something really extraordinary, because it never had, thought about doing this. So I really commend you for, coming up with this kind of a theme in which you are, trying to bring about, what was really so old and really gone back in the old times, but brings back and evokes memories of what happened at that time and how it helped to bring about the two nations of India and Pakistan. How it triggered off the whole thing. So it's really amazing how through those particularly sensory kind of, examples that you put in, or items that you put in, that you can actually experience and go back in time. And that I thought was something very well done. But again, the issue of diversity is very important for all of us. And, because all of us live in cities where people are coming from all parts of various countries, and we all have to live with each other. And we have to really start celebrating diversity that we all experience. And somehow, everybody has got to be inclusive now. We can't have people sort of, pushing people away. And then I think what Junhi Han has said, I think Junhi's comments are very valuable, because what we've also seen, for instance, in Karachi, as you probably know, Karachi was a city created by the British, by Charles Napier, after he annexed Sindh. And he thought himself to be like an Alexandria, so supposed to be an Alexandria that way. So it's really a British creation, if you like, Karachi was. And but because of the, this whole feeling with the British, for a long time, everybody felt Karachi had no heritage because it was all created by the British. And then during the 2000s, we started to have these assemblies on the streets. And we started to celebrate the British period architecture. And suddenly you found that everybody who was from God knows different parts of Pakistan and living in Karachi, and they all came and they all began to celebrate what was actually British, but really our own also, because it was built on our soil by our people. So we can't say that if something was built by the British or by somebody else is not ours. So I think that was something that happened that was amazing. But then again, going back to what Junhi was saying, in terms of Makli, there's the whole intangible heritage of the Sufi traditions that is there. So when the Sufis came to this part of the world, and there were these non-Muslim communities, obviously, in Pakistan, that is now Pakistan, and they began to preach, but it became something for everybody. So the Sufis are revered equally by Hindus, by Sikhs, by Muslims, by all of, whoever is around. And that's the amazing intangible feeling that's there. And this is what Makli is about. It's a really it's all probably a unique site which has both tangible and intangible in that way. So I think, doing now different ways of looking at culture is something that's very interesting for me, as somebody who's like an octogenarian, to see young people doing this. So I'm really very, very pleased to see this. And thank you very much for this presentation, Kadambari. Thank you.
Thank you,
thank you so much.
That's actually nice that you're mentioning this, because of course, memory is something intangible, and it's something we do want to preserve, but it's difficult to capture that in a tangible form. And you've actually managed to do that by smell and the installations you've secured. We had a question actually from the audience, which is very practical. How do you capture those smells and how do you preserve them for the length of the exhibition?
So it has to be refilled actually. There are a lot of strategies that we use, because one of the good points, what I was talking about, smell that they transgress boundaries. And that's really a problem when you're looking at installations, right? So they have to be confined in a certain way. So that's why there were a lot of sensors that we had used, which would, have a presence of the person. Then it would, come out, and fans and things like that to curb it out. Going on the first part where we were trying to think about, how are we creating these smells? So we used two different methods. We started with the perfumers, the modern perfumers, but then we thought it would be best to use the local artisans and the actual art of perfume making, which is there in India and South Asia actually, attars. So they're very powerful, basically attars. So what I used to do was, when we used to have like these artifacts, we used to take them to the attarwala, the other person basically, and then we used to tell him that, okay, we want some of these sort. So the odors that we created, because there were some which were not really in the area of fragrance, like for example tear gas smell, or there were other things that we created, for example the emotional response to the massacre, or these kind of things, right? Banana chips and things like that. So there were a lot of these kind of different smells that we had to take to the attarwala and then try to create it. The best was this one, which is my personal favorite, is Hyderabadi biryani. So, so it was a lot of experimentation for even the perfumer, the attarwala. He created this basmati rice, and he concocted a lot of spices and created this Hyderabadi biryani perfume, which when I was taking, in fact, to France in bottles for a talk show, I was, taken out from the the airlines, and they asked like, okay, what is there in your, luggage? And then I could show. And even when I opened the bottle and I asked in India itself that please sniff this, maybe you would understand. And they was like, and they were all confused. They were like, okay, this is Hyderabad biryani. This is biryani. So you are taking biryani perfume? Then they were all, so yeah, these were a lot of experimentations, and these kind of validations also happened in unusual manners. But yeah, I hope I've answered my question. So one was taking those actual artifacts or working along with this local artisan to create till we found that proper smell, was one of the way of getting these smells. And second was refilling, because in certain amount of time they do fade away.
But how did you then select the smells that you wanted to use for this specific memory or narrative? Did you ask people what the common thing was they were thinking of or associating with that specific event or the city they live in?
Yeah. So for many of the stories, we did have a protagonist, right? So we would actually take them back. Some of them were direct. So for example, chinar, that's like a tree. For that, it was direct. For apples, it is direct. That it's like a direct representation. But for some other smells that were there, we would verify with the people's story that we were, talking about. We would take it to them. We would ask if this is what the smell is, what they associated with, and we had to go, because the same artifact, let's say apple itself, can smell in very different ways. So we had to experiment and take it back and forth for people to experience and then validate. So we had like user testing in a way that we did with these perfumes as well.
Great, thanks a lot. I think actually this is a very nice and natural bridge to the next project that we want to highlight during this conversation. It also deals with the balance between tangible, intangible, how to capture and preserve it, but also how to work with communities to actually select what you want to preserve. So Prasiit, may I ask you as project coordinator of the Fuzzscape project to do your presentation?
Thank you so much, Sanne. And just go on. Sorry. Thank you so much, Kadambari. It was, because we're working with a lot of common senses like sight and sound, using smell for cultural heritage and intangible heritage sounds very interesting. Something that we had never thought of, but yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. It's very, very innovative. So going to my presentation, Fuzzscape is a multimedia project aimed at the documentation, archiving, and storytelling of intangible heritage, especially music, in the context of Nepal. But it's a two-layered project. We are documenting and we are archiving, but also what we're trying to do is sort of create a contemporary, like we're trying to contemporize traditional and folk music, so that in the hopes of trying to make it more accessible to contemporary times. But we might be wrong. But I'll discuss this more later. It is run by a multimedia production house called First Factory Productions, which is based in Kathmandu, and which is very much based in Kathmandu because most of our team members are born and raised in Kathmandu, which is a problem again, because Kathmandu is such a bubble. Like in most of the countries in the region, there are cities which are bustling and which have their own importance. But in Nepal, it's the whole culture, the whole contemporary popular culture, let's say, is centered around Kathmandu. And when we were thinking of Fuzzscape, it was the three of us, the co-founders of Fuzzscape. It was me, Roy Chakya, a very famous music producer, Rajan Shrestha, ethnomusicologist and a multimedia artist, who came together, and we were just thinking of how we were getting bored with the commercial assignments that First Factory Productions was doing. It was mostly TV ads and music videos and all that. But we were trying to, because we were musicians, because we were documenters, photographers, video artists, so we really wanted to get out of Kathmandu and really do something. So we thought we should get out of our bubble and then go to a different place and make music. So we went to a city outside of Kathmandu. It was again a friend's place outside of Kathmandu, and it was just the first episode, the pilot episode, was just a few friends hanging out making music. It had nothing to do with the community. It had nothing to do with the music that was made by the community. But we had always known that popular culture, the music that we grew up listening to in Nepal, was in some way dictated by this decade, or if not centuries, of oppression. The control of and even erasure of indigenous language, indigenous culture. So that's why it transcends to music as well. In the hopes that there is one Nepal. This idea of one Nepal had helped in erasure of a lot of indigenous music, culture, tradition in Nepal, and that now seeps into the mainstream media. That's how now seeps into mainstream culture. Even the music of Kathmandu is not actually mainstream, even though it's the capital of the city, capital of Nepal. But so there are, according to the census in 2011, there are 215 ethnic groups in Nepal, which speak 213 different languages. So there are so many diverse instruments, so many diverse languages, so many diverse music in Nepal, but we do not really know about them because that did not fall into this idea of one Nepal or one ethnicity, one culture on the earth. So, but it's impossible. What we're trying to do with Fuzzscape is trying to give a glimpse of this idea of differences within the small region of Nepal. There's so many ethnic groups, so many cultures, so many languages, and so many music instruments that we had never known growing up. So we're trying to explore that and introduce that to the internet world, let's say. Till now, Fuzzscape has been to Banipa, which is close to Kathmandu, to Sharmathang in Helambu, to Janakpur, to Birganj, to Bhojpur, to Monang, and recently we went to Tang as well. And I'd really like to announce through this platform that we are thinking of releasing it in the the end of August or this September, this new episode of Fuzzscape. And over the years, we have collaborated with many, mostly young artists around Nepal. You know, musicians, photographers, theater artists, researchers, archivists. But we cannot ignore the fact that, like most of the places in the region, the young people are, slowly moving out of their country or their regions. Like, there's a lot of out migration going on. From small towns and villages, a lot of people are going to the Middle East, Malaysia, India, or coming to big cities in search of work and their livelihood. And from more affluent families in the cities, they're going to the US, to the affluent parts of the world, to Australia, to Europe. So there's this, that has created a sort of vacuum, which is a big danger for intangible heritage in Nepal or also in the region, because most of this is oral tradition. Most of music or dance is oral tradition that has been passed down from generation. So if that generation does not exist, how do we pass it down? So there's more and more, the importance of archiving and documentation is really important. That does not mean that we are the only ones doing it in Nepal even. There have been a lot of musicians or researchers that have been doing a lot of research in different parts of the country. And also in our recent trips, in the 3 trips that we made, the 3 episodes of Fuzzscape to Manang, Janakpur, and Bhojpur, that was funded by the Prince Claus Fund and British Council, we have been in contact with a lot of young people there, those who remain, and they've been documenting this, because they know that it's important. So they upload it in their social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, so that people can see. And now the challenge is to really collect them, and that's what we're trying to do also, which we're trying through fuzzscape.com. And the challenge, like I said, is compiling all those. And because we are not full-time into Fuzzscape, we have our own profession. There are musicians, there are videographers and photographers involved. The question of sustainability, how do we sustain a project like this, is very important. So yeah, I would like to pose this question later on as well. But again, coming back to the project, what we are discussing for a long time is this question of appropriation. Like I said before, we are trying to contemporize traditional folk music, but do we even have the right to do that? This tradition, these songs, these music have been sustaining itself for centuries, and us as city dwellers, city folks from Kathmandu, going to different parts of Nepal, do we have the right to really, ask them to contemporize these music, put in digital or electronic beats, and then make it more accessible? So we're still discussing. I mean, we don't have any answer. Probably there is no answer. We're still talking about this. So we're confused, and to all the cultural practitioners out there, we really want to pose this question: what is it that we should do, or like, is this idea of contemporizing really the right way to go forward? But in sort of like a relief, Chandrajit Chaudhary, in our recent trip to Dang, said, what we want is for our children's generation to come forth and take what little culture we have left, to study it, present it in a different way, and thus promote it. This will help the community, culture, arts, and tradition to prosper and continue. That gave us a little bit of relief, but then again, reality hit, and we're still back in that questioning loop. So because of the grant that British Council and Prince Claus Fund gave, we had these exhibitions in the center of Kathmandu through a very important music festival called Echoes in the Valley, and then later that went to the British Council Nepal for a month. This was really fulfilling for us. Like, we had always been digital, our presence had always been on the internet, but having this physical shows was really, really important for us. And now for our next phase, we're thinking of really making it more accessible in physical form in different parts of Nepal. I would like to show a video, a little bit of snippet of what Fuzzscape is. So if you could play the video. Can you play the video?
Tangba aba Kolkata Riabuni, Aguchiringo Yulde Shagitani, Ulogre Aguchiring and Tingo, Eldana, Shiki, Kurakami, Aba Kolkata Yakabuni, Polichiri Bukami, Ogonga Ata Anna, Chogo, Paleti Shuse Trilogy, Atom. I was a Poligo Kimi Tello, Ogonga Aguchiring like Bukamari. Ujuju manang je poli kati puji, taldingi da chopri top taba poli kati pila yamu, kangyovre poli kati pila khaga ya yalamu, nga poli gaya pal de manang pari khaga ya yalamu, taldingi da nga poli gaya kalkatari froze ayablamu, fyangze gaya yablamu, pal poli hungri mo nga poli gaya yulri khaga na shage pe kini damu.
Thank you for playing that video. And I would really like to thank Prince Claus Fund and the British Council for supporting us, and also Nepal Picture, Shikhar at Nepal Picture Library for sharing these beautiful photographs from the archives of Nepal Picture Library and the archives of Nepal. Yeah, and if you want to check the videos out, the YouTube of Fuzz Factory Productions and also fuzzscape.com. Do check that out. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Prasiit, for sharing that with us. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I actually got goosebumps of the video you showed. It's beautiful, it's breathtaking. And I think you really addressed some of the issues that are so important to all of us in this, participating in this panel. I mean, diversity of culture and how important that is to preserve it in all its diversity that it's there, but also the difficulties that there are with preserving intangible heritage in the diversity because of migration, because of youth not taking on the cultural traditions of their ancestors. And I think you're also pretty brave in being critical about the work that you're doing, asking those questions of yourself. And maybe, if I heard you correctly, this might be the most pressing issue that we might want to address at this point. How do you deal with this kind of issues? How do you avoid cultural appropriation? And I can imagine there's some panelists that want to help you in addressing this question. Kadambari, you want to go first?
I think the best way to go forward is actually go and talk to the local community, I think, which even he has done. But I think the best part is to represent and rather not give our own thought process. We can use our creativity and things and create a larger platform so people can reach out and create sort of opportunities for them. But it should be dealt very very well, removing all the biases, which even we were sort of, very keen on when we were representing people. So, for example, when we were looking at, people of Kashmir, when we went there, so one of our team member actually went there, stayed with them, and he has written poetries with them. He validated and then came back. So at that point in time, we were very careful that we are not putting our, we are not appropriating and, representing something that what is our imagination and not them. But in a way, we were trying to represent, because in a way we need to do that in many cases for people to empathize with them, right? And then to create opportunities for them as well. So I think this is what, how I treat the practice and, go forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Junhi?
Yes, maybe yes, Anna. If I can, maybe I can bring maybe I can share some of the UNESCO's approach with all of you. First of all, of course, I'd like to highlight here that the issue related to local communities is very important and even occupies the very central part of discussion. Not only in living heritage, but also world heritage. And within the area of intangible cultural heritage for UNESCO, actually the local communities are the principal stakeholders. I mean, as just pointed out by our colleague right now, because they are those who create and practice, and thereby they own the intangible cultural heritage they practice. On the other hand, much of those who research, document, and involve in their safeguarding measures are outsiders and non-community members. So in view of this, UNESCO established a set of ethical principles in dealing with the local community. Therefore, first of all, it is important to acknowledge that local communities are those who own those living heritage. And for example, we consider that they should play a primary role in various activities related to their living heritage, such as even documenting and even conducting measures for safeguarding their own intangible cultural heritage. And if I can just comment maybe some of the question made by Prasiit, you talk about appropriation, and of course, definitely this is one of the fundamental issue. And I think one of the UNESCO's, the recommended approach maybe can give some insightful ideas about this. And of course, they should be consulted. And then when you document, they should be consulted, and we should know what is their aspiration. But at the same time, I think one also should not forget that intangible heritage is something which is evolving. Even they do not contemporize their, let's say music or dance, whatever. With by generation, there is a certain evolution. So at the beginning, I remember when UNESCO was debating about the establishment of the international treaty for safeguarding intangible heritage, the convention, there was a lot of discussion on what is intangible heritage, because many of the countries, for example, I'm Korean myself. In Korea and Japan, for some historical and the society's background, we have many intangible elements which are petrified form. So there was a lot of discussion on petrified form, but finally the majority, and then when UNESCO gave the priority, and then the major stakeholders status to local community which practices it, and then of course when they practice it, it is naturally evolving. So of course it does not prevent that something is contemporized, but we should not focus contemporizing. But young people, of course, they can adapt. Maybe some talented young people may come out creative manners, but everything is to be discussed. And then I think at the end, the decision should be lying, within the local community who own and who practices. I hope this is also some hint. Thank you.
Thank you. Yasmeen, you want to react as well?
Yes, I think very much so. I think Junhi has very clearly, elaborated as to what it is all about. But I thought it was really a fascinating project, because there is a bunch of urbanites who are venturing into these areas which they probably never had visited before, and being fascinated by what was going on there, documenting it. So I think maybe they're the only ones who can document, because the ones who are actually practicing those or using those instruments don't have the means to actually do that. So I think it's a very noble thing to do that, because I really believe in documentation. But I think the question that we raised, I'm trying to sort of see the parallel, maybe also in old towns, how we try to conserve old towns, where we gentrify those areas, and so that the people who actually used to live there no longer live there, because everything becomes so much more kind of beautifully done that they can't afford even to live there. So there is this danger of gentrification of this intangible heritage as well, when you start using it for your, like big singers or big musicians use them, and they become actually, somehow it's remote from what it was, from the context, from the people who are actually practicing it. So that, I think, is always a danger that is there. But on the other hand, if you are seeking inspiration from the old and doing something new, I think that's also something that's acceptable. Because if I take the parallel in my own work, which I'm taking inspiration from vernacular traditions and using them for doing safe structures for the poor, I'm trying to mix the two in a way where it's beneficial to the poor also, and then the poor get very deeply involved into it. Like Junhi was saying, we can't do anything unless the communities themselves are part of it. So I think that's where you have to make sure that it's not done in isolation by people from outside, but somehow you make sure that you are there working with the people who actually are practicing those particular, art form. And also, if I may draw a parallel with crafts, because this is something that we've all been grappling with. What do you do with crafts? Now, in the past, and we've also done it in my lifetime, I've done quite a lot of it, where we got the poor to make their beautiful craft to be able to market to the rich. And that again is a gentrification process which doesn't really help the poor. So now the conclusion I've come to, and my philosophy now, of course, is the barefoot social architecture, which I'm talking about, low cost, zero carbon and zero waste kind of stuff. And what we are doing is that, for instance, when Junhi helped us with the glaze tile, the Kashi work in one of the monuments that we were conserving, and those we've transferred to the community, because I really believe that the community, when you say the craft should be mainstream, it will not be for the rich. It has to be with the poor. So if you can popularize what you're doing among communities themselves, then you will be a winner. But if somehow those are left behind and you are taking it to an upper level, then maybe we don't get the benefit that we're looking for. So I know that I can just see the struggle that you're going through, because I've gone through it myself as well, in terms of craft, in terms of urban renewals and so on and so forth. And we just have to be very, very careful. And I think what Junhi has laid down is very clearly said, and I think these the guidelines are always there that we can refer to, but it's easy to write it all down, Junhi, I have to say, but very difficult to implement. And so we have to really try to find ways to do it right. And it's a difficult proposition, but I just enjoyed very much all that you've done. So wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, does it help?
No. One thing I would like to point out is I think I missed this in the presentation as well. We very much, what we try to do is try to include a musician or an artist from that particular locality where we're going. But still, that does not make, that's just maybe a cop-out. So just because we include an artist from that area does not mean we are safe from all the blame that we might be getting. So like one thing that Yasmeen had just pointed out about involving the locality, just making it popular in that region. Like one thing that's really famous in India, the border region between India and Nepal, Bihar, UP, and in our side, Birganj, the major cities of Birganj and Janakpur and all these areas, is this new trend of Bhojpuri songs that are sleazy in a way, but that's very, very famous, and there are a lot of cultural practitioners in the area who are commenting on that. Bhojpuri songs, which have, like, if you see it on YouTube, millions and millions of views. They're viral in a way. Everyone in the region, even in cities, know those songs. But traditional culture practitioners or practitioners who really are into the traditional forms of Bhojpuri music or Maithili music, or Awadhi music in those regions do not like it because they're sleazy. Now, how do we differentiate between popular culture and then culture that should sustain and maybe contemporize itself? Like, what we are trying to do is completely other than what the popular music in that region is. But are we relevant to that culture now? So that's something that's really bothering us.
Well,
Kadambari is laughing, so she knows what the Bhojpuri music scene is.
Yeah, I can totally relate to. In fact, not just famous there. They have transgressed all boundaries, and they're all over India. And many of us has not only heard them, we know it's sleazy, but it is so catchy that we have even danced on those. So yeah, you're rightly like you rightly said.
I'm not sure whether we are talking of popular culture. I thought we were talking of vernacular traditions and the intangible, culture that is there from before. So the question is not how we deal with the popular culture. We have to see what was there that we want to preserve and for it to perpetuate. And just to give the example of the crafts of this glaze style, the Kashi work, which is of course very highly valued and was done only for very special buildings. We brought it out to the poor, and the poor are making products for the other poor. And that's how they're making money, and this is surviving. The craft is surviving. And of course, there's innovation going on there as well, because we are saying take every pattern from the Makli World Heritage Site. So everything is very beautiful. And we think that the poor maybe don't know how to appreciate, but they love these things which have these patterns. And that's what somehow I think we can do with other intangible kind of elements as well. So I'm not sure whether that's really the exact thing that you would like to hear, but I think with music also there must be ways by which you can see how you can take the traditional intangible, not the popular stuff, but see how it can be then popularized among communities where it actually grew from. I mean, the thing is to take it back to where it actually came from somehow, and the authentic part of it, not just anything, I would say.
Yeah. So true. Yeah.
And I think we're actually really addressing this difficult balance that there is to keep in the danger of what you said, Yasmeen, the gentrification of tradition, but also what Junhi said, okay, it is still evolving, how we can do it without it petrifying. It is something that it's changing, but it's also a danger of being lost completely if there is no documentation or contemporization. And what I can imagine, Prasiit, that it is very important to engage youth specifically in projects addressing this. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier in my presentation as well, we do not have to involve the youth, because of the democratization of digital technology now, they are doing it themselves. It's just everywhere in Nepal. I can just speak about Nepal, the places where we've been, they have smartphones. So they document it, they post it in their social media, so it's not like sort of these people from the cities coming in and teaching people how to really document or how to archive their tradition. It's happening everywhere. So I think we just need to collect it, collate it in a way that it's accessible to everyone. So I think it is very, very important that, also saying that, it is very, very important that we really contemporize it, maybe, because we have to make it accessible. We will say, I'm coming from the point of view where I believe that making it more modern, more contemporary is how we're going to make it more accessible. Maybe that's not even the way. Maybe leaving it as it is and just putting it as it is out there in social media or popularizing that form maybe is more truer form. But what we have experienced is that making it a bit more contemporary through like adding electronic materials or electronic beats to those forms, maybe we'll have that pop taste to it that will somehow influence people to go back and look for the original form. That's why Fuzzscape.com is also archiving these original forms of music, original forms of ideas and philosophies, and putting them online. So it's this is very thin balance that we don't know where we stand right now in terms of like what we need to do or what should be done as well. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would very much agree with what your approach is, because you've got to innovate, and I think Junhi really clearly said that as well. You've got to innovate. You've got to, for today's world, there can be many things that have to be added on. But the important thing, as I said, it should not be gentrified, but should be such that it is popular among the people from where it came from. So that is what you have to be careful about. It should not become immediately Western pop music, but something that has the roots. And integrity of heritage, as we say, is always very important. So somehow that's very elusive, but that's something that you have to try to see how you maintain that. And that's where the creativity comes in. That's what you can do if you're a real good creative composer. So, yep.
I also look at it as a way of remediating it. So what is there in a certain form, when you remediate it into documenting it in a digital technology, you're not actually taking it as is, but you're adding a layer, and it becomes a different artifact of its own. So think about, though it is still happening in music, but think about a story that would have been there, that would have been then written, explored in a written format, and some imagination or that media properties would have been added, because it went from the normal narrative, which was maybe told from one generation to another in a format of a book. So when even this happens, right, when you're changing from one particular media to another, it will still have some inherent properties and it will change. But I think you should not worry so much about it, as long as you're, as Yasmeen also pointed out, keeping integrity intact. And when you are changing, it definitely will change from one media to another. And maybe you're also creating new artifacts. So I don't think there's a problem there, but I think you should look at from the angle of that you're creating a new artifact rather than creating something which was directly taking the same and putting it somewhere else.
Yes, maybe I just do one additional thing, if I may add. I fully agree with the points made by Yasmeen and also Kadambari. I think nobody should oblige the youth to keep a certain form of music as it is. I mean, they can enjoy if they wish to the contemporarized format. But at the same time, I think one should be very cautious to document it as a original form. So documenting it and enjoying it is a totally different thing.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for adding this. I hope this helps you innovate, Prasiit, but actually it sounds like it's getting more and more complicated the more people comment on it. So I'm not sure if this was very helpful. At least
nobody has an answer.
I appreciate that it pushes us to think further about what we are doing and to be critical about ourselves. And I think that's for every single one of us, it's a very important approach in being critical and keep learning what you're doing. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And actually, I'm quite shocked how fast this went, but we're already at the end of this really inspiring webinar. As a last question, I actually just want to ask all of you if there's something that you will take home and think about, what you will integrate in your work. What did you get out of this conversation? And maybe Yasmeen, we can start with you.
Well, I think anybody who works in heritage and of any form of cultural heritage, I think has very difficult choices to make. And I have sleepless nights always. And I cannot tell you how difficult it is to try to do the right thing. And I think all of us will keep on struggling with that. And as long as we are honest with ourselves and with whatever our medium is, I think probably we'll find the right path to follow. So, but we just have to keep on working harder, I'm sorry to say. Yeah.
Thank you. Kadambari?
I think I love the exchange of the views of Prasiit and even Yasmeen's comment and Junhi's comment. It really, brought about a lot of viewpoints. I also had my own, but looking at it was really nice how she talked about, gentrification and also conservation in a way, and then Uni's whole, aspect of how, UNESCO deals with it. Being a trained designer, we're asked to actually write our own autobiographies and look for the biases before we go to people and ask them questions. So that part of thing is already there, but understanding how it is, how different people do it, and how much scrupulous we all have to be. It just brings about that we really have to question harder in terms of making our work. I'll take that as something contradictions that we need to really keep alive in order to find the right path.
Thank you. Junhi? Oh, you're on mute still.
Yes, now, yes. So if I can, I maybe can share with all of you a kind of wish that I'd like to see in this region, as this webinar is for South Asia. The local communities' involvement is very important, both in intangible heritage and then within the world heritage, and inclusive management, towards the inclusive heritage management and conservation. But I'm in India since April 2018, and wherever I go, I talk about local communities' involvement, and I have the impression that this idea and this kind of a trend and recommendation is still not very much spread in this part of the world. And so I hope that this webinar also would contribute to spread the spirit and the importance of the local community's involvement in dealing with the intangible heritage and also with the world heritage. Because for example, this local heritage involvement for world heritage is officially part of the strategic objectives of the World Heritage Committee. And when the World Heritage Convention was established in 1972, one of the most important aspect was also to give heritage to the life of people, to the life of community. So I wish that the raising awareness of this aspect is spread in this region very quickly, and then we can make further efforts towards this inclusive heritage management and give a role to heritage to our local community's life. Thank you.
Thank you. Prasiit?
Yeah, I really liked how Yasmeen ended her comment saying, "I'm sorry to say it, you have to work harder." So that's really how it has to be. Yeah. So that's like it's wisdom passed down amongst us. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the participants. I learned a lot from looking at heritage in a more unconventional way of the smell and all that. That's something that I'd never thought of. And working long term will make a difference. So that is something that I took out of this session, and I will definitely look more into how and the different forms of heritage and different forms of working in heritage, because how we were dealing with heritage was completely in the form of how do we make it more accessible? How do we contemporize it? Maybe contemporizing it is not the answer altogether, you know? So the idea of pop media and pop culture and heritage might be something different altogether. So yeah, we really need to, I think we should have more sessions like this to discuss like how, with more stakeholders in the government, in the more policy level, like UNESCO. Like, thank you, Uni, for coming in. So like how do we make it more accessible in the region? Because I think in South Asia, these things, tangible or intangible heritages, are more living than other parts of the world. So we really, like, it's all everyday life. So I think UNESCO and all these also, like, stakeholders play a much bigger role in sustaining these projects or sustaining heritage in this region. So we really need more of these discussions and talks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can actually only agree that we should have more discussions like this. And based on the discussion that has been going on in the chat as well, there's a lot of people who want to get in touch with all of you to learn more about the projects and your innovative approaches in preservation of heritage, but also to address the specific issues of cultural identity. So the links to the project will be definitely shared in the chat. And if you want to read more about the projects supported through this joint call, you can also download our review, in which all the 13 projects supported through this call are further explained, and there are also more reflections on the issues that we addressed today. So thank you all really for joining us, for commenting, for thinking, for challenging each other. And I'm really, really grateful that you all joined. Thank you to all participants for sticking with us and listening and commenting. Thank you to the tech people, James and Jill and Orla, for the closed caption. And thank you, of course, to the British Council and the Prince Claus Fund for making this all happen. If you are interested to read more about the organizations, then you can check out the websites of the British Council and the Prince Claus Fund, also for collaboration and grant opportunities. And I think that was it. Thank you very much for joining. And I hope we can all stay in touch and continue this conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye then. Goodbye.
Yeah.
So much.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.